Hey everyone, and if you are listening to this on the day the episode is released, Happy New Year! I'm your host, Mike Snoonian, and I thought before we move forward with some new business in 2024, the Pod and the Pendulum wanted to take one last look at the year we left behind, because honestly, 2024 looks terrifying. And you are dragging us kicking and screaming into this year. So you can't make us go. No, actually, it's just been like another really strong year for horror movies. And we have assembled the team. And we are going to, a few of us are going to give our individual top 10s for the year. Some movies that you may have seen. These are always great. You know, if you've seen these movies, maybe you'll agree. And if you don't agree, you can yell into the cloud and tell us what dunderheads we are for our lists. And that's okay, too. So here are the co-hosts we have with us today. Up first, from the Bodies of Horror podcast, looking at horror through the lens of disabilities, we have Miss Nichole Goebel. Nichole, how are we, love?
We are doing great.
It is lovely to have you on, as always.
Yes, excited to be here and talk about what a fantastic, I think, year 2023 was for horror. Lots of, I think, really interesting titles and having a slight glimpse of what other folks chose within their top 10. I'm really excited to talk about some of these films.
Yeah, spoiler alert, you have the most eclectic list of the bunch. I was looking at your titles there, and I'm like, these are some good titles, and some I haven't seen, so I'm like jotting those down for later. So I am really excited to hear you speak on some of those. Also with us today from... I feel like when I introduce you, it's like introducing Apollo Creed in the Rocky movies, because he had so many nicknames. This is also from Halloweenies, from the Losers Club, and from Girls on the Boys, Miss Rachel Reeves. Rachel, how are we?
Hey, I'm pretty good. You know, I don't have like James Brown behind me, like dancing to introduce me, but that's all right. You know, it's good to have goals and something to work towards.
She is the queen of Sting and living in America, Rachel. That's all we care about. So on with us again. We have from the Movies for Life podcast, as well as a writer for Bloody Disgusting and Man of Valum, as well as others, Mr. Brian Kuiper. This is kind of the warm-up before we kind of like getting our looks in, before we have our deep dive into all the Frankenstein movies. Brian, how are we?
Yeah, doing good. Glad to be here. This is my second podcast recording of the day so far. Well, this is 2 of 2, so I don't have more to come after this. So, but, yeah.
So what's your regimen then? How do you keep that voice? How do you keep the pipes feeling fresh then in between recordings? Do you have
water,
like water, no ginger tea, no honey, no gargling salt water, anything like that?
No, I don't take that good care of my voice. Sorry.
Okay, nothing like that. Not like 4 cigars in between. Just nothing
you got to
like
do
that.
something to make it sound cool, right?
Okay,
so, no.
Fair enough. Okay, well, here's how we're going to do this, because we're each going to give our list. We'll go 10 through 1, and what we're going to do is we're going to each take a moment to talk about every movie individually. But since there's going to be a few titles that ended up on multiple persons' list, we'll hold off on talking about a movie until it gets to like the highest rating. Meaning, like if Nichole had something at 8 and Rachel had something at 5 and Brian has it at 4, we'll hold off on all talking about it until it comes up at number 4. And that way we're not talking about one movie multiple times. And I think that will let us get through this a little bit quicker. And I think it'll be a little easier for the listeners as well. Yeah. And we'll keep things chugging along. Okay. Any questions on that?
We're good.
Oh, sounds good. Smart.
And I'd ask, I'm just basically stealing that directly from like Halloweenies. I'm like, just how they do. I'm like, man, that does seem like a much better way to do it. Why did we not do that last year? Then I remembered I had COVID and wasn't thinking straight. So I had a bad fever. Before we kick off the official list, are there any honorable mentions for each of you? Any titles that didn't quite make the list but just fell off at the end? And I see a couple of y'all shaking your heads yes. Nicole, anything you want to mention?
I don't know if it's necessarily horror. I think it maybe falls more into a thriller suspense category, but Eileen, I just saw that and I really enjoyed it. I had also just finished the book, so if you're looking for something to read as well, check that one out. But I really liked that, and there's a couple of films I think that we'll talk about that are on other folks' lists that were just like, it was really hard to kind of figure out, like, do I talk about this one? Is this one that really ranked in the top 10? Is it more of an honorable mention? So I don't know if I should mention those because they are going to be talked about.
Okay. Yeah, you can mention them, I guess, when we get to them on other person's list, if you'd like. How about yourself, Rachel?
Yeah, same thing. I do have some that are on some people's lists, so I'll save those. But also outside of that, I really liked the new VHS movie. VHS 85, I thought that was a pretty solid entry in that franchise where, all the segments I actually really enjoyed. So I had a lot of fun with that. And Suitable Flesh, I thought, surprised the heck out of me. It was so fun seeing Heather Graham and Barbara Crampton in those roles. And it just felt like a very loving tribute to Stuart Gordon. So I also had a ton of fun with that. So those are two of my honorable mentions, and I'll save the rest.
I have a couple, and the thing is, I'm going to mention them, and I know there are ones that Mike did not like, but I liked Candyland. I know you gave that 1 star, and I was like, oh boy, sorry, man. But I thought that was an interesting movie. And I liked the Meg 2. I thought that was a lot of fun. Any movie where Jason Statham says, as he's kicking someone into a shark's mouth, "See you later, chum." I mean, gotta be great.
5 stars, cinema.
Yeah. I also wanted to do a quick mention of the Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. I thought was it had some limitations like makeup and some things like that, but overall, I thought there were some really interesting ideas, and it's sort of a riff on the Frankenstein idea that was pretty good. And some of the others that I might mention were in other people's lists, so I'm just going to leave it at that.
I have Candyland dead last for my year-end rankings.
Well, my dead last is The Exorcist Believer, so
that's okay, and that's a totally acceptable ranking for that. There's a couple of mine on here that others have listed that just missed my cut. I want to give a shout out to Brooklyn 45 from Ted Geoghegan, which missed my list because it's more drama than horror than anything else. But it's really well acted. I've really enjoyed Ted Geoghegan's films so far. I think that he gets a lot from his performers. And I thought that was a kind of a spooky little chiller, but it was more drama than anything else. Also enjoyed VHS 85. I thought that was a lot of fun. Thought it was a return to form. Spoonful of Sugar is the other one I'll give a mention to, because I thought in a year where there was a lot of discourse around sex scenes in movies and are they necessary and do they do anything, that to get something that was so overtly sexual and to have something that was so intrinsic to the plot, I thought that was really well done without being gratuitous, and I really enjoyed it. And then the kind of like twist at the end of it I thought was really great. Like I actually did not see that coming. It took me by surprise. So Spoonful of Sugar is one that I wish I could include in my top 10, but just it was overall just a very strong year. There's one other that is on a few other top 10 lists that I wish I could have included, that I wish got a lot more love overall from the public, but I'm glad we get to talk about it here with some others. So all right, let's get into it. I will start with my number 10, and then we'll go through. I'll start. My number 10 is Birth, Rebirth, but I'm going to hold off on talking about it right now. Brian, what is... Rachel, what is your number 10?
My number 10 is Cobweb.
All right,
and
we're going to hold off.
I was going to say, I'm ecstatic to hold off.
Yeah.
It's on somebody else's list.
Brian, your number 10.
My number 10 is also Birth, Rebirth.
And Nichole, your number 10.
No, I've got to join the choir. My number 10 is Birth, Rebirth.
Excellent. Would you mind doing the honors and talking about why this made your top 10 list?
Yeah, I really like kind of reanimation and kind of Frankenstein type stories, and I thought this was such an imaginative kind of take on it. I also really, really loved the main performances. I thought they were so standout in here that there were some really, I think, exceptional performances. It really, there are some pieces of the film that just didn't really hit with me, but it really just, I think, comes down to the performances, and they were just so strong.
Yeah, it's a great take and a great update on the Frankenstein mythos. I thought Laura Moss, with their script and their film, did something unique with Frankenstein. I think something we don't often see done. I thought Marin Ireland gave one of the more underappreciated performances of the year, that she's someone who starts off like really cold in this movie and approaches things from like a purely scientific, almost like Peter Cushing's character in like the Hammer Frankenstein movies, maybe a little less villainous, at least like overtly villainous. But as the movie progresses, she becomes much more empathetic and much more parental as the movie goes on. Yet the curtain gets pulled back and you see how some of the monstrous lengths that she actually went through to create this creature, or bring this young girl back to life. The only reason it's this low on my list is it feels like the horror elements were kind of forced in to the movie. It felt more like a drama. It's like, oh, we'll put some horror in it because it's easier to sell that way. Brian, how about yourself? This is also on your list.
Well, again, I mean, obviously, if I'm suggesting we cover Frankenstein, this is kind of a big thing for me, right? And there are so many riffs on this, either happening right now or in the pipeline. Guillermo del Toro's got his coming out, and Poor Things just came out, which is, I don't know. I couldn't really call that a horror film personally, but this was the one that I think fit the category, that still fit the genre, I should say, that was the one that I found most compelling of that sort of twist and take on the Frankenstein mythos. And yeah, just kind of echo what everyone else said.
It's interesting to me that we're getting like all these Frankenstein kind of movies right now. I have to wonder if
the Diablo Cody Lisa Frankenstein's coming out early next year.
Like I know things trend. It's just like thinking about like AI and kind of this, I'm just wondering if this is an interesting way that people are exploring just the idea of, man creating a monster kind of thing, or like who's the monster, and but in a classic cinema way. And but I really enjoyed this one as well. I did see it, and it would be on my honorable mention list. Same thing like what you said, Mike. It didn't necessarily feel like a horror movie. Yeah. But I also find that very intriguing because the subject matter is very like dark, and some of the, the processes of reviving this girl, it's dark, and, it's not easy to watch at all times. And so it's just one of those things where it's like, well, what is horror, what is horror and what makes horror could depend different for everybody. And I thought, the performances were great. And just for a story that's as classic as Frankenstein, I appreciated that this felt a new way to explore it. So.
We're coming off a year where there were 2 Dracula movies in theaters with Renfield and Last Voyage, and neither did well at the box office. And that's not to say anything about the quality of those movies, but neither lit the box office on fire. And yet there's always like new riffs on Frankenstein. And I think there's some genuine enthusiasm for it's Lisa Frankenstein, like the Valentine's Day movie coming out. Like, I think that looks like a lot of fun. So it should be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of love for the classic monsters. At least I hope so, because our downloads will be in the shitter for the first start of the year if there's not. It feels like there's a lot of love for the classic monsters, but the studios don't know how to make them relevant for modern audiences. So it should be interesting to see like how they keep getting adapted and what folks can do.
Well, I think when we look at these adaptations, especially of such classic stories, I mean, these are not just classic in terms of, the Universal monster films. I mean, these are classic stories that go back even much further. And I think it's really interesting when we see trends of either Dracula or Frankenstein, the Invisible Man, kind of emerging. Like, what is that saying about where we are as a society, and what are we going through that we kind of want to process it through some of these stories, like Frankenstein having a bit of an uptick as we've been navigating a pandemic and having to come out, reemerge as folks that are changed and different from that experience as well.
Excellent. And just the questions we have about science sometimes, like there's a whole segment of the population now that won't trust science no matter what anymore. And I think that there's something to be said about like the mad scientist and where that might go too. So you're right. Spot on. All right. Number 9. Nichole, what was your number 9?
I had to give it up to Jigs and go Saw X.
Okay.
This was a film.
We'll hold off talking about. We're going to hold off for right now. We'll get into it though. Rachel, your number 9.
My number 9 is also Saw X.
Okay. We're going to still hold off for a bit. Brian, your number 9.
My number 9 is Evil Dead Rise, which I know we're holding off on.
We're going to hold off for a bit. My number 9 is a movie called Megalomaniac. Has anyone else seen this one? All right, so I'll speak briefly about it. It played festivals in 2022 and then got a video on demand release this year for its official release. It's kind of like if Henry from Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer or the lead killer in The Golden Glove, if they had children.
Oh, lovely.
It is, it is like a twin brother and sister that are raised by a serial killer and then they become adults. It is one of like the meanest, most uncomfortable movies I ever sat through. It is the reason why like people give content warnings before movies. I introduced it. Oh yeah, it is. I introduced it before Telluride Horror in 2022, having only read the synopsis and not having seen it. And, my introduction style tends to be a little glib and a little jokey. And that's how I introduced this movie. And then, like, you sit through 90 minutes of really bad, like, sexual violence and overt violence and, like, torture, like, psychological, emotional, and physical torture. And I'm just, like, sinking in my seat, going, like, I can't believe I, like, made jokes out of, like, not knowing how bad it was going to be. But it's really well done. I think it's a Belgium movie. It's a brother and a sister like that are raised by a serial killer. They become adults, and like the daughter like lives under the brother's thumb, and the brother goes on to be a serial killer in his own right. Child protective services get involved. She is manipulated and abused by many others. It's a hard watch, but it's also like really well done. And it's about kind of like finding your own fucked up version of family. I can't recommend it to everybody. It is definitely not a good time at the movies, but if you want something a bit more extreme, if you want something that is going to just shock and disturb you, Megalomaniac is going to fit that bill. So it was a last minute addition, and it made it onto my list. So yay.
Proceed with caution.
Everybody just looks,
Yeah, it sounds like
everybody just looks horrified right
well,
now.
but I'm glad that you bring up a movie like this, because one of the things that worries me lately about horror or the horror community is this idea that, oh, you can't go there.
Right.
You know, that there's a lot of, I feel like there's been in recent years like this pearl clutching going on. It's like, you know, but I just say horror is transgressive. Horror is supposed to push the boundaries, because if horror doesn't do it, what will? You know,
Right.
And so I'm all for it. You know, whether I see it or not is a different story, but, you know, I'm glad something like this is out there, you know.
There's a difference between like punching down
Right.
and punching at like marginalized persons and communities and pushing boundaries. And I think we need to do a better job of establishing what those delineations are.
Sure.
Because I feel like you're exactly right, that there's like, seems like there's a whole generations of persons that want all of their art to be safe and sanitized, not just for themselves, but for everybody else as well. And it's very odd seeing that, number one, coming from people that are young versus old, and number two, coming from persons that identify with like the left rather than the right. That is a very scary thing. As someone who grew up like with the PMRC and looking at like old conservatives trying to condemn art, now we're seeing like young leftists condemn art for being too extreme. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument is always, is this being extreme for extreme's sake?
Right.
Or is it being extreme to say something?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that when something is extreme just to be extreme, I think it just becomes really kind of pointless and a little bit grating.
Oh, I get that.
But I mean, I think that there's obviously a lot of room for things to be transgressive and to go to places that make folks uncomfortable.
Right. But I think there's a difference with that, where before someone would say like, this is extreme for extreme's sake, it's not for me and I don't want to watch it. I think there's, not everybody, but there's a growing contingent of persons that are saying this is extreme for extreme's sake, no one should watch it and it shouldn't exist. And I think that's where it becomes dangerous.
Yeah, it's really easy to throw things out on the internet and say things, you know? So it's just like, I take it all with a grain of salt. It's like, just,
that is true.
You know, posturing sometimes where it's like, do you really actually, are you just trying to say this because it makes you feel better, but like you don't actually know what you're talking about?
That's a good point. All right, our number 8. Let's go to number 8. My number 8 is Evil Dead Rise, and we're going to hold off on chatting about that for a bit. Brian, your number 8.
My number 8 is Eli Roth's Thanksgiving.
All right, we'll hold off for a little bit. Rachel, your number 8.
My number 8 is also Eli Roth's Thanksgiving.
Okay, I'm going to continue to hold off. Nichole, your number 8.
My number 8 is a Swedish horror film called The Conference.
I have not heard of this.
Me neither.
Nichole,
I think I just heard of this today for the first time. Before, I'm just scrolling through Twitter, I saw this title.
Yeah.
The poster is amazing. Can you discuss this one, Nichole?
Yes, it is seasonally appropriate. And it is workplace horror. I don't want to give too much away just because I think that this is a film that a lot of people may discover as more people watch it and talk about it. So I know that there are a couple of folks that I've seen kind of perk up on it a little bit on Twitter, but it's about these employees that take a retreat this time of year in Sweden, and a bloodbath kind of ensues. And as someone who really, I think, loves kind of the psychological components of workplace horror, because you have a little bit of everything. You have people that are ganging up on that one employee that, no one really likes, and they feel kind of shies away from their responsibilities. You have people that are kind of the airing of grievances, where it's like, well, I'm just going to kill you, but I'm really upset because you didn't file your paperwork on time. So I really like just getting into that mentality. Again, I also really like the fact that it came out at a seasonally appropriate time. So if you want something cold and chilly and snowy to watch, this is also really good. But especially if you like films like The Belko Experiment, etc., I think that you'll kind of pick up on this one as well.
Excellent. So it's workplace horror, and everybody wants to kill like one particular employee, or they just decide to kill each other?
Well, it's, it kind of starts off with there's kind of one outcast. And then I think the mentality kind of shifts as more people kind of show their true colors. It's very interesting. And it takes place, it's wilderness. It's like a wilderness retreat for that. So it's a little bit different. It's not just, let's sit in a conference room type of thing as well. So I like it. And also Sweden, stunning, beautiful. So.
And it's on Netflix, it looks like.
It is. So
all right.
Accessible.
I've got my movie for tonight then. I have my movie tonight to get to. I am a couple away from 400 for the year, so this is going to edge me that much closer. Wow. There was a movie that came out in France. It played some festivals called Vincent Must Die, and it sounds like there's some similarities where like someone at work would see him and then try to kill him for no reason, and then they would have to go to HR about it. And just like have a discussion with HR. It was like started as like a black comedy and then got really dark. So, all right. Number 7. Nichole, what is your number 7?
I picked for number 7, When Evil Lurks, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah. And Rachel, your number 7?
My number 7 is Evil Dead Rise.
And I think we can talk about it now. So, Rachel, why did this make your list?
I had a lot of fun with this. Like, I liked the way it looked. I liked the setting. I liked the performances. I appreciated, the Easter eggs and the call. Like, it wasn't too overdone, I think. And I just appreciated a new story. Like, I like where this franchise is going and how it's not reliant on Ash, but there's some Ash representation in there if you dig deep, and I just think that's just so cool. I really liked the last one as well. I liked the 2013 one a little bit better, but I was just excited to see this franchise just do something new and to continue that pathway and not feel like it was tied to the original series. Or the original trilogy, I guess, in the TV series. Like, a lot of other franchises seem to have a hard time doing something new, and so that's what I liked about it. And the sound design in this movie I thought was incredible. So I was a big fan.
And Brian, I believe you also had this in your top 10?
Yeah, that was a little down the list, but yeah, this was. It just starts with that great cold open and that title sequence where it is just kind of overwhelming. I love that they sort of reintroduced some humor back into it a little bit. It's a darker humor than in the old ones, than like Evil Dead 2, which is a little bit more,
slapsticky.
I guess splat stick style. This is just a really, really dark humor that underlies it. It's kind of a mean, nasty movie, but in a way that is still fun to watch. And so I had a good time with it, and I will never look at a cheese grater the same way again.
I think they could have done more. They could have done more.
They could have, but it was built up in my mind so much more than it actually ended up being. But it was still, I was like, ow,
Yes.
I thought the wine glass was more extreme than the cheese grater. I thought that was like,
well, for me, the tattoo gun towards the eye was, was, I mean, I had to look away, but there's and I love, there's sort of something later in the film I don't want to give away that sort of reminded me of like Society.
Yes.
Sort of a shunting scene, and I thought, we're going places I haven't seen before. I love that it's in a different setting than a cabin in the woods. And boy, it just worked for me in a lot of ways.
I love this. I thought this was pretty high in my list for most of the year. And then like a lot of things came out towards the end to just bump this down a little bit. I thought Alyssa Sutherland was a real find here. She was brilliant in this, and she's enjoying like every minute of being on screen and being like the Queen Deadite. And there is just something about being like a really mean mummy in a movie, whether you are Joan Crawford in a movie, whether you're Faye Dunaway in a movie. There's just something about being like absolutely horrid to your children that is amazing. And Alyssa Sutherland kind of captures it here. And we talked about like movies being transgressive a moment ago. Like this is one that it crosses that taboo line where you have like 3 children at the outset of this movie. And by the end of this movie, you do not have 3 children anymore. 2 of them are dispatched with in pretty horrid ways. Like, and that's something that happened a lot in 2023. Like kids weren't safe in movies. Yeah. And I really, appreciate that. Not, for any sick reason, but it's just like, no, anything can happen. I think I put this just slightly ahead of the remake. And I think I do that only because I appreciate that they move the setting. I think they get the most that they can out of like this really tight, confined space of this apartment and this apartment building. They do a lot with it. I really enjoy that. And I love, like you said, Rachel, the audio mix here is brilliant. And you do get just that hint of Ash on the vinyl soundtrack. And the idea of him maybe time traveling a bit is great. It's pretty wonderful. So I think what's great about this is you can do more of these movies and not have them confined to a simple cabin in the woods. Nichole, anything you want to add?
No, I think that the cold open is such a wonderful, almost like bait and switch, because you think that, oh, a cabin in the woods, teenagers, young adults, and then all of a sudden we are transported to kind of a apartment building in shambles in the city with a family, and I really like that change up. I think it just, like you said, it opens up a door for lots of these stories to be told in various settings. So I thought that was a very kind of cool way to kind of slap the viewer a bit and be like, no, this is not what you expect. Be aware.
Where would you like to see the Evil Dead series go next? If it went anywhere, where would you like to see? Because this movie's pretty successful. They've talked openly about wanting to make more of them and not wait 10 years in between movies again. Where would you like to see like the next setting be?
I think it'd be cool. Like you could even do different time periods with this, you know, kind of like what Prey did, just because it's like, well, this book is well, we've seen different time periods, right, in this franchise already. So it's like there is a precedent for that. So that could be kind of fun. And yeah, just, I don't know, just different settings all the time. Just expand the mythos and the reach of this book and the story behind that. It could go anywhere, I think.
Space.
Yes. The ocean, like a
Jaws
Leviathan
evil.
situation, like where they've got like the station on the bottom. Peter Weller could be in
Love
it.
it.
Someone smuggles the book onto a submarine.
Set it in a daycare. I would love to see.
Daycare? God.
That would be amazing. You're telling me that you would not love to see like 3-year-old deadites absolutely tearing it up and like having a handful of like underpaid like daycare workers having to fend them off and like using
like, what is that movie, Cooties? And yeah, all
Cooties.
the kids
yeah,
are zombies.
but you could go, but you would have like the budget to do
Much
it
younger.
like really right, like a real big budget, and you're using like oversized teddy bears to fend off like crazed deadite 3-year-old toddlers.
Oh boy.
Or even go one more level. Just set it in a maternity ward.
Oh God.
Amazing. I think people should take our pitches right now, Hollywood. Sam Raimi,
Yeah.
if you're listening, call us. All right, Brian, what was your number 7?
My number 7 is Cobweb.
And I think we can talk about it.
Yeah, you bet. So this was a movie that is set at Halloween, but for some reason it was released in like June or something like that. And so it got, I remember why it was released on Barbenheimer weekend.
Same day.
So so it got lost in the shuffle. But I thought this was a great Halloween vibe movie. It has sort of the sensibility of something like People Under the Stairs and things like that that I really dug. And I was genuinely surprised by where it ended up going in the end. It sort of sets itself up to be something, but kind of does something else with it. The third act is just fire. That last sequence that actually takes place on Halloween is one of my favorite things I saw this year.
I'm so happy this was on somebody else's list because, like, I feel like this movie just got screwed over in a couple different ways, and I really enjoyed it as well. It does take a turn that is not going to work for everybody. But I thought it was really fun. I loved the vibes, the performances. Are you kidding me? Like, Anthony Starr and Lizzie Kaplan, right? That's who the mom is. I thought they were so great and so creepy, and it was just so fun, I thought. And just a great Halloween movie that, you know, just the way it's told from the kind of the kid's perspective and looking at his parents and trying to figure out if are they bad, are they not bad, like what's going on here. I thought it was really effective, and I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. I did the triple feature on opening day of Barbie and Oppenheimer. I did Barbie, then Oppenheimer, then Cobweb. And I was the only person in the theater for Cobweb, which was interesting. I actually wound up like walking around the theater as it was playing because I'd just been sitting for so long. And you're right. Like, it is beautifully captures like Halloween vibes. Like, I have no idea why this came out in the middle of the summer because it looks like the perfect October.
I think they
it's a tax write-off. Like, David Zaslav would just burn all the negatives of this movie. Like, if it was a Warner Brothers release, we never would see it. Lizzie Kaplan just goes for it here as like the deranged mom here, like the spooked mom. Like, she is so wonderful here. I really love it. And you have like Woody Norman is like Peter. Like, he's awesome, and he is in gives a couple great performances in horror movies this year. He's also in like Last Voyage of the Demeter as well. Yeah. And he, like, spoiler alert, like murders his parents in this movie. It's amazing. Again, just something and he's the hero of the story. I feel like the third act, it feels like the third act has a lot of studio notes. Yeah. And it feels like someone watched watched Malignant and said, can you do a little bit of this, please?
They watched it in Malignant and were like,
and said, do some of this. But I'm okay with it because like it goes for a wild ride. And again, you get like more kids that are, and fucking Peter also, like, you don't see it, but you hear it, like, Peter, like when he finally stands up to his bully, like cripples the kid, like absolutely throws him like down a flight of steps. Like it's Bret Hart throwing, it's like the Undertaker throwing Mankind off the top of the Hell in the Cell cage, basically. Like that's what Peter does to the kid. So good for Cobweb. It's a great flick. Nichole, did you catch Cobweb this year?
I did. I really liked it, and the same thing that you guys have mentioned. It really does capture a Halloween vibe. I definitely think that, I can say this now, and who's to say next year? I do think that this is going to be a film that is just going to grow and grow each Halloween season, with people looking for that Halloween feel movie and discovering this one, and it, I think, really becoming a lot of people's kind of seasonal go-to. So I really liked it. And yeah, I mean, to what you were talking about earlier, Mike, about, there's seeming to be lots of kids in peril. Even though we have kind of this young badass, you still are kind of like, where is this going to go? Like, what are the parents really capable of? It's not, I think, it's kind of like, I don't know about this kid's safety and what's going to happen.
It's like Ralph Wiggum saying, I'm in danger. Like, that's this whole...
Yeah. And just the whole, I always like a film that has a real kind of messed up family kind of system behind it, too.
Yeah, and as I thought about it later, is like, I don't know that this makes 100% sense, but logic kind of goes out the window at one point in the movie. But it's like, okay, whatever. I just went with it and had a good time.
It was a very good time. I mean, especially after watching Oppenheimer, which is, like, we could blow up the world at any time. Like, all right, this is a little bit more lighthearted and fun point.
Yeah.
So my number 7 was Saw X, which we can now talk about. I'll just say that it's kind of hard to believe that we're at the point where the Saw movies are offering me some nostalgia, yet here we are. I'm longing for the good old days of the early 2000s when things seemed simpler. This one's like oddly moving. Like it's actually like got like some emotional heft to it. And it's also wickedly funny, and it's self-aware in a way that a lot of the other Saw movies aren't. I like that like Kramer gets a real foil to play against this time. Like there's someone who's just as bad as he is. I think an issue with some of the Saw movies is like he's going against some real hapless people. Like Eric Matthews, Detective Matthews is not the intellectual foil for a Cocker Spaniel, let alone John Kramer. And it doesn't skimp on things that fans come to Saw films for. Like, I love Spiral. I had it pretty high in my rankings, but this movie does what Saw fans wanted to do. And Rachel and Nichole, you both have Saw X in your top 10. Like, what do y'all love about Saw 10?
I mean, I thought it had some great traps.
Well, when you say that...
It's a trap!
I did it to myself. I trapped myself.
Love you, Admiral Akbar.
With like some really actually unsettling things. I think it's interesting where it fits into the entire franchise. A sequel, prequel, this is the 10th Saw film. Like, that is insane. Tobin Bell I think this is like one of the movies where we see him the most. And we get most of his story. Like, there's a few others where he's pretty heavy, but maybe screen time wise, like this is the one that has him the most in it, which is pretty crazy. And, I'm not always a fan of when they kind of take the villain and try to get you to like sympathize or empathize with him. But Saw has always done that really well. There's always been a really blurry line in this franchise of his motivations and stuff. And I thought that they handled that pretty well. And yeah, I liked the setting too, like taking it to Mexico, I thought was really interesting. I love that we still get Billy somehow. Like, I don't know how he got there, but he's there.
I wonder if there's a cut scene when he calls Amanda. He's like, here's what I need you to bring. Like, you pack that doll.
I know.
Like, do not come
forget.
unless you pack.
Like, that's insane, but I don't care. And I think that's just, we're at the point in this franchise where it's just, you go along for the ride, but you can tell that the people that made this film have a lot of passion and they know what they're doing and they know what the fans want, but they're not pandering to the fans. I still felt like it was a solid film that takes, I don't know, expands the world even more and gets it out. It felt less grimy too in a lot of ways, and that was nice. It was like, all right, we get some daytime, some color. Okay, I appreciate that. Finally,
like Saw City looks nice. There's nice coffee shops. Like that scone looks really good.
Yeah, exactly.
There's parks.
Yeah, I really, really was surprised by Saw X because, to be honest, as much as I love the franchise dearly, I was really perplexed by what they were going to do and how they were going to tell a story that had both John and Amanda kind of in a front and center way, especially, so long into the franchise. How, what level of suspension of disbelief would we have to kind of adapt? And I thought that they told such an interesting story. It allows us to kind of really understand a different kind of facet of John as well. It is really funny. There's some really stellar lines, especially and not even lines, like when John is just sketching out in the park traps. It's one of, I think, the funniest moments for me of the year, because I'm like,
It's a trap.
Exactly. But I really, I don't know, I like that they found a way to kind of sew together, I think, some different timelines as well. Because that's always, I think, a criticism, especially when you get into later bits of the franchise with different things not necessarily adding up and connecting the way that you think they should. Characters doing things that just make no sense. And I think we have a pretty clean-cut story here. And the traps are really brutal, but I think even though, we also, I think, have a really interesting emotional relationship to these villains, because on one hand, we understand, you've done a really awful, shitty thing. You're exploiting these people, and you're causing so much harm and pain to these people.
Yeah.
Not to mention, the lives that may be lost because they're not undergoing the treatment that they think that they're supposedly getting. But then you also understand the positions that our main villain has really kind of orchestrated and how she's kind of put them as pawns in the game. And I really like that. And to your point, having John really have someone that he can tango with is so fascinating, especially towards the end, kind of up in the control room. And, we finally get everything kind of spelled out and we understand the situation. I think it's really, really well done and has me cautiously optimistic for the next entry.
Well, SAR 11 coming to theaters this fall, so
crazy, just
That's
insane.
right.
Yeah.
It's back when they're just churning them out 1 year after the next. So.
And I should mention this was my number 11.
Oh,
so
nice.
just
Excellent.
outside the top 10. So I like this movie a lot. I had a good time and was genuinely surprised by it, especially as sort of not a huge fan of the franchise. I like it, but it's not one of my favorites, but I did like this one a lot. This was actually one of my favorites of the whole franchise.
Excellent. Well, Brian, what was your number 6?
What was my number 6? My number 6 is The Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Well, let's talk about that movie.
Okay, so now there were a couple of Dracula movies this year, as we mentioned. Renfield, which I liked about half of. I love the Nick Cage, Nicholas Hoult stuff. The Awkwafina stuff, detective, police stuff didn't work so well for me. This one, again, I didn't love the bookends. I didn't love the beginning and the end, but I love sort of the core of the film. And just that, all the stuff on the boat. I think Dracula was scary for the first time in a long time. A really cool design. Maybe a little bit like, the crawler things in The Descent with wings. But, hey, that's a pretty cool design. And I was impressed by it overall. I found it to be, kind of put that... It was a for me, it was the best Dracula film in a long time. The last one I remember that I can think of that is really a terrific Dracula movie is probably Coppola's version, 30 years ago. So this was, I think, the best probably since then. Granted, some of those in the meantime have been like, Dracula 2000, which... is what it is, but this I think was really well done and had sort of the alien set in the 19th century kind of vibe to it. But hey, it worked for me, and I thought it was really fun, effective, throwback to classic, monster movie kind of thing, and I like that about it.
Yeah, I enjoyed this as well. I saw this in theaters. I thought it like you said, aliens set on a boat. I could probably get it done without like the last couple minutes. I think it tries to set up for a sequel that we're not going to get. I think we are totally fine getting a self-contained story here, and I think they do a really good job bringing to life this small section of the Dracula mythos. It's cast amazing. I mean, Leon Cunningham, David Dastmalchian, you just get great performances across the board. And again, like little Corey Hawkins, like the little kiddo from Cobweb, just like bringing the thunder. Does like a phenomenal... Actually, no, that's the wrong dude. Corey Hawkins is the lead here. Why do I have the kid's name wrong? Let me get that correct, because that is not fair to either of them. Little Woody Norman, I am sorry about that. Like doing double duty this summer. He's great in here as well. And another movie where kids are in danger and you think that he'll be protected. Atmosphere for Miles, I think that's something that like Andre Overdahl has done really well, whether it's Scary Stories, whether it's Troll Hunter. His movies always look gorgeous and drip atmosphere.
Yeah, this is an honorable mention for me too. Like I really enjoyed this. I love, the setting and the period and just horror on a boat. It's great. Give me both, horror on boats, horror on trains. Like I'm always a sucker for that. And I think it was cool to see this part of the story that we usually only see for like, a minute in a bigger Dracula film. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. I thought it was pretty solid.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, I like this one a lot, and I think it's a good kind of change of pace. I think there's obviously a lot of Dracula stories that also kind of veer away from kind of the general Dracula mythos and delve more into, I think, some different elements of Dracula. So I like seeing a little bit of the root story here at its heart, and it being more of that kind of monster creature type approach too. It's just something really different that I don't think you see a ton of as much, and especially great like if you're looking for something unique to show friends, like if you're having a movie night. I think this is something that's really going to like scratch a lot of folks' horror needs.
Yeah, agree. Nichole, what was your number 6?
My number 6 was Sick.
Want to talk about that one?
Yeah, I really, really liked this one quite a bit. And I know that we talked about it on the Patreon at the very beginning of the year. So, yeah, I was a little nervous about what a pandemic, real and pandemic-infused horror film could be, what kind of story, what kind of take it would have. And I had a lot of fun with it. It's, a contained space, kind of a home invasion spin as well. I really like the performances. I like what it says about kind of culpability as well. I think there's some really interesting things there. And again, I really like kind of a messed up family at its center. And I think that you have that with these parents that are on the hunt for kind of the source of their son's sickness and death. And it's just kind of a wild thing to watch slowly unravel.
And Rachel, I know you like this one quite a bit as well, right?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty fun. And just like Nichole was saying, it was like, oh, like I'm not sure about if I'm ready to see this like COVID movie or how it was going to be handled. But I thought it was really like, it had a sense of humor about it too. Like, yes, that was a part of the film, but it was also, it had some dark humor into it that I appreciated. And the action sequences I thought were great. I thought the tension was great. I liked the performances. So I think it's a fun slasher. And I think it'll gain in popularity as, people get less sensitive about COVID, as we get time heals all, right? And I think that it'll gain in popularity after that because of it. Yeah. But I think it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
This is one I haven't caught up with yet, but I've heard some good things, not just from you, but from other podcasts and things around. So it's one that it's on my radar that I want to be sure to catch up with.
Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I mean, Kevin Williamson obviously can write a fun slasher movie. Mm-hmm. John Hyams, mostly known for doing like fun direct-to-video action movies like the Universal Soldier sequels. He did that kind of isolation horror movie Alone, which is a paranoid thriller, like a woman on the run.
It's great.
Which is really good.
It's a good
so,
one.
And this, I think, follows in its footsteps. And again, we kind of talked about like being able to empathize with the killers in a movie. When you learn the motivation of the killers in Sick, you're kind of like, oh, you are killing these people because they were like being irresponsible during the early days of COVID. You know what? I get it. I kind of don't necessarily disagree, because I remember like, look, we think back to 2020 and we remember our worst selves during those days. Like, I'm sure some of us were like, how dare you like not wear a mask in public, good sir or madam? Like we were not always our best selves, and we would wish horrible things on people that would flout the rules. So like I found some sympathy for the killers here, and it does make you play with your allegiances a little bit. Nichole, you're shaking your head there a bit.
Yeah, I felt no sympathy, no allegiance to the villains.
No.
I mean, as someone that is incredibly immunocompromised, no. But I think that there's kind of a bridge with our main character who, we see her being lax with certain rules, but she's not doing it out of malice. She's not like, those are the kind of people that, it's that I would have lots and lots of grace with. Mm-hmm. But I think that, I think it's just about a level of understanding and saying like, this is what's important to me. And, if we may agree to disagree, and that's just where we stand, and we have to kind of figure it out. But yeah, I think that, you do find some sympathy with kind of the overall story of what the parents are going through. But at the same time, it's like, murder begets murder.
It's a much different movie, though, if they're very sympathetic towards one another.
Right. I do like the sequence, though, in the car where she gives her the mask, and you just know that there's just something really, I think, kind of deliciously devious about, like, something that's supposed to be protective being handed off and being like the demise and the downfall for a character too.
Yep. Let's see here. Rachel, what was your number 6?
So my number 6 was Megan.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, which is like wild because it seems like so long ago that it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that was like January of this year. Like that feels like it came out 8 years ago. But this year. And I was just really surprised because I thought it was going to be, I don't know, a little cringy just because of how it was marketed, or, you know, felt like it was trying to pander to a TikTok crowd, which it absolutely wasn't, is, but it was so much smarter than that. I had a lot of fun with it. I liked the doll design, the music, the sense of humor, the performances. I also liked how, like grief and all of that is part of the story, but it didn't rely on that. It's also a great, like, fresh, modern kind of monster movie. And Megan is mean. You know, there's some real, like, brutal scenes in there. So it just was pulled off way better than I expected, I think. And yeah, we're going to get Megan sequels. I mean, it was a moment, right? Megan was the moment. And I was thoroughly impressed that they were able to pull this film off as well as they did.
It feels like Megan ushered in like the year saying horror is going to be fun this year.
Yeah.
That we are, and there were a few movies this year that continued the trend of like everything is trauma. And like we're just going to we're going to make trauma horror continue to be a thing where we're just going to keep exploiting the worst moments of a person's life for profit. But Megan announced, like, this year we're not going to be afraid to be a little bit silly at times. So we got movies like Cocaine Bear and Meg 2 and Spoonful of Sugar and Influencer. Movies and Cobweb, movies where you could have a lot of fun that were still, like, really, really good. And I know that you mentioned this on your other show on Halloweenies, like, Megan felt like what the Child's Play reboot could have been. Like, it's the best version of that movie. And I would agree to a certain extent with that. I think that would, there's a lot to be said there. It feels like this movie's a little bit early. Like, it'd be interesting to see where the next couple, because if the Megan 2 is successful, you know Jason Blum has like 30 of these lined up. He will run, which can you blame him? Like, I mean, it's, you know, God love him. He's going to just churn these out until they stop making money, because that's what studios do. With how AI just continues to be, how it continues to kind of seep into the culture and how it kind of seeps into everyday use, where Megan is going to go is going to be fascinating in the next few years.
Agree.
Plus, I want to see what the next dance move is going to be.
Yeah, you know that'll be in there.
Yeah, this movie is so much better than just sort of the memes that came of it, you know? For me, this is sort of like the good version of Deadly Friend. You know, there's some of that kind of thing going on in this. And, yeah, and you know what a Wes Craven fan I am for me to say that. But not all of them are great. Anyway, so I just had a blast with this. So much fun. And it's hard for me to resist a movie that takes place. It was definitely not shot in Seattle, but it takes place there. So, you know, I just can't hate a movie that does that.
No.
Yep, I understand. Someone from Boston and loves Massachusetts set movies, I can feel that. Yeah. How about yourself, Nichole?
Yeah, it's just so much fun. This is a horror film that I was able to see with a lot of friends that are very much like, we don't like horror. We want nothing to do with it. It's not our thing. They all love this and had so much fun and really enjoyed, I think, some of the over the top elements of it. But I think there's also, I think one of the things that makes it something that's, you know, a little bit more, I guess, this is something that sticks with you a little bit longer. Because again, this came out at the very beginning of the year. And the fact that people are still, you know, talking about it, putting it on lists. is because I think that there's a real heart to it as well. There's a lot of fun, but there's some heart to it too. And I really like Allison Williams in it.
Oh, totally.
She's fantastic. So yeah, I think that this is, again, another film that as we continue to grapple with tech, especially tech for kids and how kids are using it, I think it will be interesting to see where this takes us.
Yeah. I mean, between The Perfection, Get Out, and Megan, Allison Williams is kind of carving out a really interesting niche in genre films. Like, she's not doing anything that's like super straight ahead and straightforward. Like, she's taking these really great roles, and she's been terrific in all of them, but they're all like interesting movies. They just happen to be like very good, kind of off-kilter little horror movies that are fun and interesting to talk about.
Well, and she's not playing, I think, the same character.
Yeah,
there may be some like resonance. I'm thinking especially some pieces of like Get Out and The Perfection, with you kind of wondering like, where is this character going? What is their end game as things kind of develop? But I really like that she's just taking lots of just different stuff, and so seeing her attached to a film is kind of cool, and I'm excited to see more.
Yeah.
All right, my number 6 was Talk to Me, but we're going to hold off for now. And Nichole, what is your number 5? We've crossing over the midway point now. So Nichole, your number 5.
My number 5, I think, is you won't admit it, but it is your favorite film of the year, Mike, and that is Marink.
It is not at the bottom, but it is in that mid-level, but we'll hold off on talking about that for now. Rachel, your number 5.
My number 5 was Infinity Pool.
Okay, we'll hold off for a little bit. Brian, your number 5.
Okay, my number 5 is probably going to make most people laugh. I had zero expectations going into it, but I had so much fun.
This is like the longest intro. Like, you're apologizing for this.
Don't hate me.
Yeah.
Own it, Brian. Own it.
Okay, I am owning it. Hey, my co-host put it higher on her list. The Pope's Exorcist. I told you. Okay. Now, this was the movie that I had no expectations for whatsoever. I went into it knowing that Russell Crowe was in it, and it was about an exorcist, and it ended up being incredibly entertaining to me. It was so much fun. It's kind of a silly movie. I get it, but man, first of all, Russell Crowe was having the time of his life, and I think just seeing him riding around on that Vespa was enough to make me a fan of this movie. But it's just it was a surprise to me, because I kind of expected, this is just another exorcism movie, which, okay. But I think what I like is it delves into, there's like something deeper going on in this place. It's not just, someone is possessed. There's something with the place where they're living. You have children being possessed, which is, hey, children in danger. Cool. Great. Fine. But that's actually not really like the central portion of the movie. I think one of the, I also love that we have Pope Django the First, because the Pope is played by Franco Nero, which is amazing. I just had way too much fun with this movie, and I guess I'm just going to leave it at that. I know that I'm alone on this. I know
it's okay.
I am.
We are allowed to like what you like.
I had such a blast with it. And for me, I know there's another movie on my list that's a possession movie technically, but it's a different kind of thing. Mm-hmm. To me, this was like by far the best like Exorcist movie of the year, because the other one was just shit. Anyway, so this was exactly what I wanted in an Exorcist movie, and it was the real deal for me, and loved it. Had so much fun.
I haven't seen it, so it's like, I mean, Russell Crowe and a Vespa is enough to like, all right, I'll give it a chance, but I haven't seen it, so I can't judge you.
Yeah,
I've watched this. It was like a Netflix watch for us, and it's fun. I mean, it's a way to pass a couple hours on the couch. Russell Crowe is definitely having the time of his life with this, like, and there's no bones about that whatsoever. It does look good. I mean, like, there is like some of the set design is really nice. They've talked about wanting to make like 99 sequels. Like, let's do one for every case in this actual Exorcist files, which there are like 99 of them. And goddamn, I think I would watch a lot of those movies, because you could just get really silly
another
with
5 or 6 of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
There
is room for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I bet Russell Crowe would do at least one more of them.
Oh, are you kidding me?
He could he could milk this cow for the rest of his life if he wanted to.
Cash that check in a little vacation in Italy. I mean, he's hit that stage in his career where he can do that, and he has like nothing to apologize for as far as I'm concerned. So my number 5, and this was I'm the only one that had this on here as well. Hell House LLC Origins, the Carmichael Manor. I really enjoyed this movie, and I think part of it was definitely the circumstances, like getting to intro the world premiere of it and doing the Q&A and seeing it in a packed theater. Like, this is the perfect movie for like a packed house audience, like everybody like jumping up and down during all the jump scary bits. Like, again, I'm sitting next to Ariel during this, like when there's a jump scare, like she puts her whole body into it, and like is like sitting next to Kermit the Frog, where she would like flail her arms around and leap out of her seat. Like, there's no better way to experience a movie with a lot of jump scares. But like after part 2 and 3 were kind of disappointing for a Hell House, this is the best one since the original. It goes back to what made the first movie work. It tells a really compelling story. It's a really good mystery. It has, I think, the best set of characters that you follow around, not just with like the crime bloggers, like your true crime like vloggers, but also like the Carmichael kids themselves, like those 3 kids, the brother and the 2 sisters. Like, you enjoy kind of following them around, even knowing what's going to happen to them. And you just get a lot of those clowns. Like, okay, you think that one clown that moves around is scary? I'm going to give you 3 of them. And they're fucking horrifying, and they're terrifying. And I will never not be afraid of them. I think that Cognetti does a really good job incorporating technology into his movies. Like, making text messages scary takes a special talent, and they're able to do that here. Removing it from the actual hotel and using what felt like the Changeling house at times, I think works really well. And there were definite nods to the Changeling with like that red ball that kept appearing out of nowhere. This movie is scary as fuck. And I would say that this is going to be on the short list of movies that I watch every spooky season come mid-September, October. This and the original Hell House. I really love this movie a lot. What was everyone else's thoughts on this one?
I haven't seen it yet.
I liked it too. Like, definitely think this is a rebound from 2 and 3. So went into it with kind of low expectations, but I was on that episode with you, and I was super impressed. This is an honorable mention for me. I had a lot of fun with it. It's not perfect by any means, but pretty solid. And it's like, all right, I'm back in on the Hell House train.
Yeah, this was a definite kind kind of honorable mention. I really think it's ambitious and sometimes a kiss of death to have a film that's really trying to merge different timelines and different stories, because there's always going to be something that just comes out sacrificed and not as well, I think, kind of integrated and part of the story. But I thought that Cognetti did such a wonderful job really sewing together kind of the story that he wanted to tell with these three different kind of components. And yeah, the 2 and 3, I think both of those films have some interesting moments, but it's kind of, for me, diminishing returns after the first, and really loved seeing what I think was just something that really got back to what made the first Hell House so strong, was, these starting off with, just getting these really small glimpses of things, really living in a space where things are moving and shifting and not really knowing, where the source was and what was coming next. So I really liked it. Yeah, I definitely think that this will be one to revisit every year.
Mm-hmm. All right. Our top 4. Nichole, what's your number 4?
So my number 4 was Husera, the Bone Woman.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so this was one that I saw just some people talking about when it hit Shudder, and was really excited to check it out because I really like kind of explorations of like culture and having, I think, pieces that go down that path. And it's not necessarily gory or lots of like jump scares in that way. I think it's much more of kind of a quiet rumination about like a conflict of being yourself, being honest to yourself, and kind of the expectations that we put on ourselves and the ones that we accept from others, be it family, community. And I just think there's a really beautiful story also about like, being a parent and fitting into kind of these boxes that are expected of us, and trying to find comfort and the strength to really embrace who we are. So I like this. I think there is some really, I think, unsettling imagery as well, especially when we get kind of these visions of the woods. I don't know. I think this is such an interesting kind of special film, so it ranks very high for me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one too. This is another honorable mention. It's very creepy, but it went some directions I didn't necessarily expect, and not in a bad way. Like, I feel like it feels very modern, but it's dealing with some very timeless ideas, right? And just exploring the idea of motherhood and what all the different things that can mean for different people, I think is very interesting. Mm-hmm. And some great performances, and some very creepy imagery, and very unsettling at moments, but it's really well done. Yeah.
I enjoyed this. I thought it was a great exploration of like postpartum depression, and also like another title that came out that like had similar themes this year that's playing festivals is a South Korean film called Sleep. That I would check that out when it plays or when it gets a release. This one I think is a little bit darker than Sleep is. It's another one too, like meddling in-laws, I would say, was a big theme here, like in not listening to mom when she is like suffering or helping her out in any way. So I thought this was pretty enjoyable. So definitely an honorable mention for me as well. Rachel, your number 4.
Not divisive at all. Everybody agrees on this. This movie, it's unanimous. My number 4 pick is Skinamarink.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. This movie, it was my favorite theatrical experience of the year because I was in a foreign city. Not foreign, I was in Oregon. But I was, a city that I'm not familiar with. And just being in an audience at a little indie theater, seeing this and watching everybody's reactions was priceless, because it's very unnerving. It taps into like some sort of weird recess of like fears. It's like you don't even know if they really exist till you're experiencing it. It's also, I was just so excited after this film, and just like, all right, somebody's doing something new. And I was just so excited about the idea of this film and the filmmakers, and to see it kind of like just burst on the scene in this really interesting way and get the success that nobody expected. So, but I also loved it. I did really like it because I had never seen anything like it. And you do have to give yourself over to this film, otherwise you're going to fall asleep. But if you're game and you're willing to go along on the ride, I think it's gonna be a lot of people's jam. So yeah, Skin Rank. I'm sure you guys all loved it as well.
And Nichole, you also had it pretty high in your rankings, so
Yeah, I mean, to what Rachel was talking about, it's an experience. I think it's kind of like an immersive experience. You really have to kind of lock yourself in, kind of pun intended, into this home with the kids and experience kind of the creepy imagery. It feels very much like an ink blot test in a lot of ways too, where, you know, you mentioned, Rachel, about it tapping into some recesses of fears and things, and I think a lot of that just connects so much with like what we experience in terms of fears as kids, abandonment and being afraid to navigate the world, and all the unknown corners, and what's lurking there, and what harm can come there. I really like it. Also, to what you were saying, like, it's nice to see something that I feel is very just kind of experimental in a lot of ways, really focused on imagery and tapping into this experience that they're really kind of demanding a viewer to have. I think is so interesting. And yeah, definitely not one that I'm gonna pop on for a movie night with friends, because I like my friends, and I don't think that that's gonna be a journey that they want to take, because they're not my therapist. But I think that it's such an inventive and cool film, and really excited to see what's next for the filmmaker.
yeah. This is a movie I'm really glad exists. Like, it's not necessarily a movie for me, and I thought it was good. Like, for what, I mean, it achieves what Kyle Edward Bell is trying to do, and I'm really glad it exists, and I'm really glad it was successful. Like, I love that this got put in theaters and made like a significant amount of money. Like, that's a success story, and that's like a success story for horror and for genre films. Like, that's a wonderful thing. Like, even though this movie's like not necessarily for me, I want stories like that. And I'm glad that I experienced this movie in theaters, because there are parts of it that work like extremely well. Like that scene in the bedroom where he feels like he's talking to his mother, I think is really terrifying. And there are a few other parts in the movie, I think, like the 911 phone call, I think works really, really well. So there are parts of this movie that I think are fantastic and really well done. It's just, I think, maybe a little bit too plotting, and I think I wasn't prepared for necessarily what this experience was for me, and liminal horror isn't necessarily my thing. That being said, just because it's not for me, it doesn't mean there's not value in it. And I think the person's coming out of it saying, this was really scary for me and here's why, like, that's awesome. Like, that is absolutely, just like at the other end of the spectrum, like for someone like Brian to say, like, Pope's Exorcist, like, it was great, gave me exactly what I wanted, I had a lot of fun. That's what's really wonderful about horror, is like, it is such a massive umbrella, and underneath it, all of these wonderful stories can be told. It doesn't have to be one thing, and one size fits all. Like, there is just thousands of stories and ways to tell a story. So I'm really, even though it's not necessarily for me, I'm glad that others are really connecting with it.
I think for me with Skinamarink, it's a movie I appreciate more than I like. I guess you could say. I don't know how else to say it, but
It's
that
no
said,
Pope's Exorcist. I get
it's
it.
no Pope's Exorcist, but I actually didn't know how to rank this movie.
Yeah.
It's because it was like my gut feeling is I don't know if I'll ever watch this again, but at the same time, there is no movie that got under my skin, and no pun intended, the way Skinamarink did. It really messed with me. I don't have nightmares about movies, and I did with this one. And I would wake up and I would still see like that grainy fuzz in front of my face, and it was strange. It was like 2 or 3 days where I was just, and that song, even though it's not in the movie, that song would get stuck in my head, and it would just sort of, I don't know, this one really kind of fucked with me. And I wrote a piece on it because it really got into some, childhood fears that I had that I did not expect.
Yeah.
So, in a way, it's like the most effective horror movie for me of the year. Mm-hmm. But in another, it was like, but I don't know that I will ever watch it again.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. So, Brian, what is a movie that you not only appreciate and you like at number 4?
That would be a Finnish film called Sisu, which I suppose technically speaking is more of an action film than a horror film. But the setup is, first of all, it's directed by, I'm not exactly sure how to say his name, Jalmari Helander, who directed Rare Exports, Christmas Tale, which I just love. Love that movie. Okay. So this guy is out it's the end of World War II. He's out prospecting for gold in Finland. And he finds a haul. Okay. And some Nazis come along and they take his gold. So he spends the rest of the movie dispatching Nazis in more and more creative ways. It is ultra violent. It is gory. It's filled with attitude. It has sort of feelings of, like Sergio Leone Westerns. And you could see, sort of Inglourious Bastards kind of attitude in it as well. It's got sort of a Rambo-ish thing, I guess, with the one guy taking on a whole army. And it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. It's kind of a comedy too. It's pretty funny. But there's a part where he figures out how to breathe underwater, which is just like the greatest thing I've seen in a movie all year. And there's a culmination that involves an airplane and a pickaxe that is just magnificent. And he pretty much says nothing the entire movie. It's
excellent.
I just had a great time. I knew nothing about this going in. I didn't know it was directed by that director. I didn't know who was in it. I didn't even know it was a Finnish film. And I had no idea what I was getting into. Movie I haven't heard of, went in, was able to see it in the theater. And I don't know. There were parts of this where I was ready to jump up and clap. It was just like, it's so much fun. It's got so much of an attitude to it that I just had a blast with. This is one I feel emboldened, I guess, to put it on my horror list because Megan Navarro over at Bloody Disgusting, included it on one of her lists at one point of the year. So it's like, okay, if she calls it a horror movie, I'll call it a horror movie.
Fair enough.
There we go.
I have not seen this one, so I will definitely check this out.
Yeah, me neither.
The one thing that is a challenge about it is you can tell that it was made on a shoestring. But if I just wish he had had a little bit more money for some of it, but just like, a bigger army to fight, some of these things. But if you can get past that, I think you'll have a lot of fun with it.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Well, my number 4 is Thanksgiving. And I just love that we'll talk about it now, I guess. It is a no frills, simple as it can get. And I feel like there's been a lot of good slashers in the past year or two, but they all kind of include like a gimmick with them. Like they're almost kind of embarrassed to be just a slasher movie. And I feel with Thanksgiving that it's not afraid to be like a very straightforward old school slasher movie. This one has that kind of like glossy sheen of the 90s slashers, like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer and Valentine, movies like that. But it has that kind of nasty edge of those early 80s slashers that I love. And it does another thing that I love about 80s slashers is that you have this like inciting incident that happens. Like there's like an accident or like a violent act that occurs that shouldn't have occurred, and it sets like your killer off. And here you get that in like a glorious sequence with like the Black Friday massacre here. I love that they took the tact of, rather than making like an actual grindhouse movie, they took the tact of like, let's make this movie like the trailer we made in 2007 as like a long lost movie that no longer exists, and we're actually updating or rebooting it. And that Roth is kind of like maybe matured as a filmmaker and maybe as a human, and is like, we're not going to make this as like gross as we would have as in 2007. And he kind of talks about it in some interviews. Everyone is looking away from the camera right now, but it's really not like, there's not like it's not an exploitation movie in this. And he's talked about in interviews like, yeah, I couldn't make the kind of movie I would have made in 2007. Like you can't make that in 2023. Like it's not going to fly. It's a different time. So I really enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I don't necessarily.
I'm not saying I'm giving him the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right. Well, that's
I'm not saying like Eli Roth,
like,
humanitarian of the year.
I don't necessarily like Eli Roth as a person. I don't necessarily even like all of his films. They're just not necessarily for me. But I actually really had a lot of fun with this. So just saying that if people aren't big on Eli Roth, for one reason or another, I did think that this was pretty good. I thought it was fun. Like you said, it is what it is. And I appreciated it for that. It looks great. I mean, a Thanksgiving film, that's great. I love a good holiday film. So I agree. I had a lot of fun with this.
As someone who lives minutes from Hanover and goes to the movies in Hanover and lots and shops in Hanover a lot, where they're like, Hanover sucks. Like I was cackling. I'll admit it. Like I admit, it made me laugh.
For me, this was I love sort of, yeah, it's set now, but there are certain elements of it that made me feel like, oh, My Bloody Valentine or Happy Birthday to Me. You know, it had some of those kinds of things going on that I really liked. And I have seen, this is my second Eli Roth movie that I've actually liked. The other one was The House with the Clock in Its Walls, which I thought was okay. Yeah. I don't like Hostel 1 or 2. I've never seen Cabin Fever. I haven't seen a lot of his movies, to be honest.
Cabin Fever is fun.
Okay, fair enough. But it's just not my thing. But I really liked this, and much more than I expected. When they announced that they were making the full version of that, I was like, why? You know, everyone was very excited and was like happy for them. But I was like, just leave it as the trailer and call it good. All right, do something else. And then I saw it and went, oh, okay. All right. That's cool. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I feel like we have to cover these movies like we did the Conjuring movies, and they're like their own universe. And we're going to have to do Death Proof and Planet Terror, and then all of like the Machete movies, Thanksgiving. We're going to have to, hopefully they'll
Hobo
make
with
like
a shotgun.
Yeah, Hobo. I would love to talk about Hobo with a Shotgun, because that movie is amazing. I would love to see like Werewolf Women of the SS. Like, give me that movie. Are you kidding me? I would love to watch Rob Zombie Werewolf Women of the SS movie. That would be so much fun.
Yeah,
it'd be something.
It would be.
I think
Thank you, Rachel.
my only issue with, well, I had some issues with Thanksgiving. I have a lot more issues with Eli Roth.
Sure.
But I did have a lot of fun with Thanksgiving. I thought, again, to what you were saying, Mike, it's nice just to have a slasher be a slasher and just kind of wash over you in that way. And not have to play a lot of games with it. And I think some of the performances are a lot of fun. My only thing is that it didn't feel like a Thanksgiving film. Like, it felt more like a Black Friday, like, commentary piece, as opposed to actually saying anything about, like, the holiday.
Yeah, I understand that.
Thanksgiving.
I can see that. And I think he's said, like, that's what he was going for.
Yeah.
And Black Friday itself doesn't feel like a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that feels like a bygone thing at this point. Like, we just kind of like shop online and it's a month-long thing. Like, I don't feel like an urge to rush out the door on a Friday morning to like tramp on people to get $5 off a DVD like I used to. You know what I mean? But I hear what you're saying there. I don't know. I felt like it captured a lot of things about the holiday, like the coming home from college and hanging out in the old hot spots, the having to like go to work the next day when you don't want to, like that type of deal. But I get Thanksgiving's a weird holiday because like it's not like Christmas or Halloween where you have like decorations and songs, and it's really like the big thing about Thanksgiving is you eat turkey and mashed potatoes. Like that's what the holiday is. And no one really likes turkey. Like you know what I mean? Like we were having Christmas dinner and I made like a roast beef and I'm like, why are we having turkey on Thanksgiving? Like, why don't we just make roast beef next year? And my wife was like, well, I like turkey. And now we're not together anymore. So she said she liked turkey. So no, I'm kidding. That part is not. So, just, you know, but I don't know. Like, it's a weird holiday because it's like sandwiched in between these two other holidays. And there's no real... It's not like the Thanksgiving bunny is going to come down the chimney and leave you Thanksgiving eggs filled with chocolate and presents.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just went on a tangent there that's not even related to the movie whatsoever. Should we just move on to number 3?
Number 3.
Nichole, what's your number 3?
So my number 3 is a movie called Consecration.
What is this movie? Talk about it.
So it came out at the beginning of the year. It has Jenna Malone. I don't know that much background about it, so I can't really go off on talking about the director and their oeuvre and all of that. But Jenna Malone is in it, and she has an accent, and oftentimes accents can very easily just take me out of a movie completely and create kind of a wall. But she does so good. Her performance is amazing. She plays this woman. She's an ophthalmologist of some sort, I think, in a practice, and she discovers that her brother, who she's kind of estranged from, has died, and he was at this convent in Scotland that is very, I guess, kind of strict. And we go with her. She doesn't necessarily believe the line that she's been given, that her brother died by suicide. What she's being told by those investigating this is that her brother had murdered a fellow priest at the convent and then killed himself. And she doesn't believe that. And the religious folks there at the convent are telling her that what he did was admirable because he was possessed by demons and he was fighting it and he had to die to rid himself. And it just goes really dark, and we start to unravel pieces of her past, her brother's past, and it being very entrenched in kind of this religion. We discover that this convent had tried to adopt her and her brother when they were quite young. So it takes some twists and turns. I don't think that all of the twists and kind of the exploration necessarily of her background hits as strongly as it could. But her performance is so great, especially there's just this really small moment where she has arrived in Scotland and is basically like identifying her brother's body. And she just has like this wail. And it's so good. And she's really, really great. I have such a soft spot for Jenna Malone. I think
Okay. It's
phenomenal.
directed by Christopher Smith, who
Yes.
did Black Death and Triangle and Severance, which is a workplace comedy
Yep.
set in the woods. And he hasn't done anything I've watched in a long time, so I think I started to watch this and don't know why I didn't return to it. So I'll definitely try to get to this by the end of the year because I liked his early stuff a lot.
Yeah, this feels very much more like a kind of a religious sibling to
Okay.
a lot of his other work. But I really like it, and I am unabashed in my love for religious themed horror. So I really like this, and there's just really creepy stuff, and it goes some really, really horrific places. So
Okay. Excellent. Brian, what was your number 3?
Well, first of all, I did see Consecration in
Oh,
the
my
theater.
bad. Mhm.
No problem. And it's funny because Michelle mentioned it too, my co-host, and she really liked it as well. I think I need to give it another go because it didn't, to be honest, it didn't really do a whole lot for me when I saw it. I thought it was fine, but it didn't really do a lot. But hearing you talk about it, I think it's, and her too, it's one where I clearly need to give it another go. And because, and I remember elements of it. And so I'll have to give Consecration another try. So my number 3 is When Evil Lurks.
And we'll hold off on talking about that. That is also my number 3. Rachel, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is Dark Harvest.
Let's talk about Dark Harvest.
I love this movie, and I know that for some reason that I don't understand really. A lot of people haven't been digging it, but this was all just everything
Well,
I
it's
like.
the script.
Yeah, it has great vibes, very Halloween-y. We've said a lot of times people are like, oh, it's like a mix between like Pumpkinhead and The Purge, and I think that's very accurate. I haven't read the book, but it is based on the book. David Slade, I'm a big fan of. I was a little worried about, because it was in development hell for a really long time, how it was going to look when it finally got made, but I think it looks great. Like, it's really beautiful. A lot of shots are really beautiful. It doesn't look cheap. I liked the performances, and I appreciated what it was kind of saying on a broader scale about, Vietnam and sending boys off to war, but in a subtle way that also kind of developed this mythology for this town. It feels very homey and cozy in this little town. So everything about this film really worked for me. I was really impressed. I went into it with kind of low expectations, knowing about the background of it a little bit, but I had a lot of fun, and I think it's a great, similar to Cobweb and stuff. It's like, oh, this will be a Halloween movie, like to give you those cozy Halloween vibes.
I wanted to love this movie. It's one of the best, and it's in the plus column. It's one of the best looking movies of the year. It really captures a certain style of Halloween movie. When you think of like 1960s Midwestern Halloween, It's perfect. The visuals are gorgeous. It looks like it's been lifted straight from the imagination of like early Stephen King or Richard Matheson. Like you literally scooped the ideas out of their head and put them on celluloid. Sawtooth Jack is a gorgeous looking villain. This idea of like, it kind of combines Shirley Jackson's The Lottery with like Lord of the Flies in some ways, with kind of the outsiders. I really enjoy that. The problem I had with the movie is the script. It is putrid. It's just one of the worst scripts. It's really bad. It's really bad. The end of this
I'd
movie...
come to you. I would chime in, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So.
I think it like fit the story and the setting. Like it made like it didn't bother me, but that's all right. You're allowed to have your own opinion.
There's like a lot of allowances that are a lot of things that happen that just don't need to happen.
Yeah.
The last 5 minutes of this movie are kind of incoherent to me. Things that happen in this movie, I'm like, well, that is completely unsatisfying and doesn't make a lot of sense. Which is a shame because like this movie looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
Now, if you could just maybe like play this movie with no sound and then maybe have whatever Rob Zombie would do for a soundtrack to what would be like SS Werewomen of the SS in the background, combine those things, 10 out of 10. No, but I could see why people do love it because it is a gorgeous looking Halloween movie.
It seems like people either like me really love it and are really into it, or are just it's not
just
their
like,
thing.
yeah,
So
it's no middle
that's
ground.
interesting to me. So try it out. Your results may vary, but could go either way.
All right. Well, we're here for our big two, our top two. Nichole, what was your number two?
So my number two was Infinity Pool.
And that was also my number two.
Nice.
But we're going to hold off on talking about that. Brian, what was your number two?
My number two is Godzilla Minus One.
Okay, but we're also going to hold off on talking about that. Rachel, what was your number two?
My number two was Talk to Me.
Well, talk to us.
I will talk to you
me.
about Talk to Me. This was a big movie this year, so I don't think anybody will be surprised that it's up here this high on the list. Super fun, super fresh. I felt like it just similar, I think, to in ways to like Megan and Skinamarink. It just captured a moment, I think, and it captured that idea of being young and dumb and how casual you can be with your life sometimes. But I also found it to be brutal at times. It goes further in moments than I wanted it to, not in a bad way, but just like, oh God, this is like hard to like, okay, this is a lot. And I just thought it was interesting. Fresh faces, fresh directors. It had a very distinct, interesting point of view and style, and also had a lot of heart at it and had some interesting things to say. The ending was not it didn't 100% work for me, but I just loved everything else about this film. And like a lot of these other films on this list, it just made me really excited. And so it was great to see folks get really excited about a horror film like this.
Yeah, I had this on my top 10 as well for all those reasons. It was terrifying in parts. I thought the scares were really well set up. A lot of times in a horror movie, we'll ask, like, well, why would you make that decision? This is exactly what teenage and college kids would do if they had a magic hand that would let you talk to the dead. This is what I would have done at 18 years old with a magic hand that would let me talk to the dead. So I don't fault. Would I do this at 48? Hell no. 18-year-old me, absolutely. I thought the cold open was brilliant.
Yeah.
I thought Sophie Wilde was like a completely engaging lead. I thought she gave a phenomenal performance, and I thought like the scares really worked. I thought this is one of the best, really freshest takes on supernatural horror of the year, and I can't wait to see what these directors do next. Did Nichole, Brian, did either of you catch Talk to Me? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I watched this in theaters and thought It was so good. Definitely an honorable mention, a long list of honorable mentions. Um, yeah, I mean, I I thought it was really well done in terms of having a character, like you said, being young and being so cavalier with your life essentially and making all these poor decisions, but not in a way like you're not mad at a character. You're
Yeah.
understanding. It really does a great job at connecting you, I think, with our protagonist in that
Mm-hmm.
way. The performances are great. I also love Zoe. I think the last name is uh like Tarakis or Tarakis or
Sure.
something. Um, as kind of as Haley, this someone that kind of comes in and out of the film, but I love what just an asshole they are. Um, but again, in not a way that you're just like I want to punch them,
Hmm.
but in a way like I have both experienced and probably been that level of asshole at some point in my youth, and so yeah, in the end, it's sad,
Mm-hmm.
very sad. I
Yeah.
really liked it.
Agree.
Yeah, I caught this in theaters as well. It fell just a few spaces below my top 10. Um, I feel like it didn't connect for me the way that it did for most people. I don't know why that is. It's just one of those things, you know? But I do like it. I do appreciate it, and glad that it's kind of gotten a lot of love this year, and it's great to see that.
Yeah. All right. Let's move forward with our number ones for the year. And each of us had a different number one. So this is fascinating. What was that?
I don't know.
Okay. Nichole.
Wasn't me.
Yeah, so my number one is Beau is Afraid.
Talk about it.
A very divisive film, I think, because I not seeing a lot of people kind of celebrate it. I loved it immensely. I saw it a couple of times in theaters, and uh, just such an interesting film from Ari Aster.
What would you say because I haven't seen it. What would
haven't
you say
either.
the comedy horror balance is in this?
I
Because
would
it
say,
looks like a comedy.
yeah, it's much more comedic. I feel like it goes away. I think, especially from like Midsommar and Hereditary, it's not as I think firmly planted in horror. I just think there's a lot of horrific elements and imagery that are kind of sprinkled through the film. It's very much kind of like a fever dream, an anxiety riddled fever dream. Um, a lot. I found myself really thinking a lot about it after I saw it because at first, like with all Ari Aster movies, I think that you have to like figure out like what am I supposed to do with this film? Like what okay, now what do? And I think that he is just someone who really uses his ability of storytelling to work through a lot of things. And I definitely feel that comes through strongest here. I really like uh, Joaquin Phoenix's performance. I think it is so ridiculous, but yet also there's something very sweet and that allows you to connect. The beginning portion of the film, like the beginning third, I think if you are someone that has anxiety, this taps into a visceral experience that will just have you feeling so seen. Um, and I like it. I it's an Ari Aster film.
I don't know why I didn't see this. I honestly don't know why, because I've loved both of Ari Aster's other movies. I don't know if it's because it's Joaquin Phoenix, because I'm like, oh, I'm not a fan of Joaquin Phoenix. But every time I watch him, I'm like, yeah, that's an amazing performance. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the runtime, but I like 3-hour movies. I'm like, either be less than 90 minutes or be more than 3 hours. So it's not that. I have no idea why I've stayed away from this movie. I think part of me is just like, listen, Ari Aster, why don't you just go to therapy? Like, this would be cheaper. Like, it would cost you way less money, and you could work through your issues, and we would all be happier for it. I think maybe that's part of it.
I don't know.
But I
He
think
could still make movies. I mean, I'm not. So you're saying that no one who's ever made a movie has gone to therapy? Like, no one has?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know.
But our
Now that
character
I'm thinking
goes to
about it.
therapy in this movie. Like, he is in active therapy, and it does not go well. So I don't know. I just, he's just a director that's going to make whatever he's feeling at the time. He went through a really bad breakup. We get Midsommar. He has some family issues. We have Hereditary. Plus, like, every other of his short films.
So he's like Taylor Swift. He has like a bad experience and he creates this art about it.
I think that's where a lot of art comes from,
Yeah,
though,
it's
to be
like-
honest.
But I
with
mean,
you.
like, well, yeah, it's true. That's true.
I gotta say, I'm with you, Nicole. I loved this movie. I didn't include it on this list because I felt like for me, it fell just outside the realm of horror for me. But that's one of the things about the genre, right? Is it's up to lots of interpretation. I mean, I included Sisu on my list, right? So I think this is my favorite Ari Aster movie to date. I would subtitle it Ari Aster has mommy issues. That is what this is, pretty much from beginning to end. But I love a movie that externalizes someone's internal state. And that's all this movie does. Everything is just like this externalization of all the fears and anxieties inside a person who is pretty paranoid. And it is so compelling. I think especially that first section is so strong that it's like, I mean, the rest of the movie has a hard time living up to it, I think, but it is so good. And I loved it all the way through. There's a section in the middle that I thought maybe went a little long, but there's this, when he finally gets to the house and there's a certain cameo by someone that is like, oh man, this movie just knocked itself into a new gear right now. And so I adored this movie. This was one of my favorites of the year. It's on my our episode of Movies for Life that's dropping with our best of 2023. This movie is on my list there.
Okay.
So
Brian, tell us another movie you adored. What was your number one movie of the year?
my number one movie of the year was the first horror movie that I saw in the theater this year. It was Infinity Pool, Brandon Cronenberg's third feature. What a trip this is. And I loved all of the stuff that it's exploring about, obviously, privilege of the rich, sort of the ugly American traveler idea, the nepotism angle. There's a lot going on, and there's sort of like an existential element. And you have Mia Goth walking around with a guy on a leash at one point, and that is like, I have never wanted to be on a leach more in my life than
this is what we call hashtag life goals.
Yes. I've liked Brandon Cronenberg's first two films as well. I think Antiviral is really interesting. I think Possessor is great. But this was my favorite so far. And boy, I think I think there's a lot of promise in this guy to be as influential, as groundbreaking as his father.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see where he goes from here.
Rachel, you had it on your list as well.
Oh yeah, I loved this. I thought I just like the way Brandon's like mind works and these just weird fucked up ideas and situations that people get themselves in, and yeah, everything Brian said, all the ideas that it's exploring. Yeah, Mia Goth's performance is just incredible, and seeing, you know, Alexander Skarsgård and kind of this interesting character that's like intentionally, I think, a little against type for him sometimes.
Yes.
I just, everything about it I thought was very interesting and super fun, and yeah, explored some interesting ideas in a very interesting way. So yeah, I also enjoyed this thoroughly.
Yeah. Nichole, you and I both had this as our number 2. What were your thoughts?
I really loved it. I love a film that isn't afraid to go to some really, I think, like, interesting, thought-provoking, more of those existential and things that you really are thinking about for, like, weeks after you see it and being like, well, I wonder what they're trying to say with this. I love the idea of kind of fighting yourself, in your image of yourself, and what that looks like, and, you know, having this version of yourself that basically pays for your sins and transgressions, I thought was fascinating. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Brandon's work so far, and you can obviously tell that there's some influence of his dad in his work, but I think that he just goes down different paths that are so fascinating, explorations of, like, you know, self and how society views you and those types of things. I just think they're really fascinating. Mia Goth on a, you know, the hood of a car.
Jay.
Yeah, it's just so...
That's a line reading, I tell you.
Yeah, it's so incredible. And, you know, in a year where she gave some really... Coming off of a year where she gave some really incredible performances, I don't know, just, this is such I think, an interesting film. And definitely, if you are a fan of Antiviral or Possessor, this is just gonna, like, speak to you.
I remember seeing Antiviral when it debuted at Fantastic Fest, and they did a Q&A with Brandon Cronenberg after, and they asked, like, how much of your dad's films influenced you as a filmmaker? He's like, not at all. And everybody just exploding with laughter. This is truly, like, the apple does not fall far from the tree in terms of, like, visual style, in terms of themes, and I am totally okay with that. Like, this is definitely exploring themes of nepotism, and you can see him kind of maybe working out some of his own feelings there in terms of what's on display at the screen, but also this idea of, like, fighting against, like, mediocrity, fighting this idea that, like, maybe I only have a position because we know we have money, because we're born into money, and I'm allowed to explore art, I'm allowed to explore creativity because I have the means to do so, but I don't necessarily have the talent to do so. I'm not saying that about Cronenberg. I think he's a brilliant filmmaker, but you're seeing that with the character of James here, and this idea of, like, the ugly American, and how you can turn your sins into entertainment, like them kind of, like, watching themselves get murdered over and over again, and going out of your way to commit these heinous crimes because you know that you're rewarded for it. If you have the money, you can do whatever you want. If you have enough money, you can just buy off anybody that you want and get away with it all. And that's all on display here. And it's, again, we talked about how there's like a lack of like sex and sensuality in movies, and this is a deeply sexual movie. I actually, when I saw this in theaters, a group of like high school boys left during like the orgy scene. Like they could not handle it. They got up and walked out of the theater. Like it was too much for them. I absolutely love this movie. I thought it was brilliant. Strong recommend. I thought of the 3 Mia Goth performances in the past 12 calendar months, I thought this was the strongest of the 3, and she was brilliant in both X and Pearl as well. So this was almost my number 1 yet for one chunky boy. Rachel, your number 1.
So my number 1 was When Evil Lurks.
Talk about that.
Yeah, I just was so impressed with this. I loved just how it was just brutal at points. It went further than I expected. You know, there's certain things that happen where you're like, oh, no, that's not. Oh, shit, that did happen. You know, like it surprised me. It scared me. And I was just really impressed by how this film was able to create this world and, you know, convey this mythology around this plague that infects and possesses creatures around it and these towns to birth this evil. And so much of that was just through dialogue and by the interactions between the characters and what we were seeing there. And it was just it sold me. It brought me into this world, and I was convinced, like, they were, you know, a goat standing there was scary because they were telling me it was scary, and I was believing them. And I thought it was just executed so well, and such a great style of filmmaking and storytelling, while clearly on a budget, while clearly, you know, working within some confines. It was scary, and I cared about these characters, and I thought that where it ended up was also really interesting. I was thinking about it long after it was over. And also just pointing out, like, another Shudder film. Like, there's several Shudder films on this list, and ones that we've talked about. I don't know, Shudder having an incredible year with films, which has not always been the case. But yeah, this one I found it the most personally affecting, I think.
Oh, agree. Yeah. Nichole, you had it on here as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, everything that Rachel said, I think is also just, you have a family. And kind of exploring those relationships and those dynamics and how this plague and the mythology and the lore around it and the community around it kind of shape that family dynamic, and also kind of rip apart bits of it as well. Also, I think one of the most, I don't want to say shocking scenes, but the dog.
Just like unexpected, I guess.
Yeah,
but it telegraphs it.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
and you know it's coming.
But I like.
But you're conditioned to think they won't do it.
Yeah, but it just does it. And talk about, like, you know, insert the Michael Jordan "fuck them kids" here. It's so brutal, and definitely, like, if you like that component to your horror, I think you're gonna be well fed with this one. But yeah, I like that it takes a premise that, you know, maybe we've seen bits and pieces of before and does something really interesting.
I love that Damien Rugna throws the audience into a world where, because this is my number 3, he throws you in a world where, like, exorcisms are a fact of life. Like, nope, we accept them. It's a thing. We're not going to spend a lot of time explaining it. It's just like, this is part of our world. And it builds and builds and builds to what you think is going to be the showcase exorcism, but then just snatches it away. Just like, boop, just like that, snatches it. Like, you don't get that. Kids are terrifying in this movie, and kids are also in mortal danger in this movie. Yeah. You have I think just as shocking as the dog scene is the scene when the other brother is driving down the side of the road and you see something happen and it's not put front and center. And it's one of the most horrifying visuals of the year. And I won't spoil it, but listeners, go and watch this movie right away. It is absolutely horrifying and just extremely well done. I absolutely love this movie. I thought it was just about perfect. Could have been anything in my top 3 could have been number 1 for the year, but for like a coin toss. Brian, what were your thoughts on this one?
Well, I love a movie that sort of explores, familiar territory through a different lens. And, we've seen so many exorcism movies, but this does it in such a different way. This is sort of like the folk horror version of that, and I really liked that. It wasn't bound to a particular religion or anything like that. It was just they don't even call it a demon, they call it the rotten. And it's those ideas are just so fascinating, and it's a different cultural lens as well, which I love to see, and just told in such a compelling way. And I was lucky enough to see this theatrically, and I'm so glad I did, because it's one of those movies where I was watching it holding on to my armrests, not realizing that I was holding on to my armrests until my hands hurt at the end of the movie,
Excellent.
that kind of thing. So just again, just like Mike said, in my top 3, but could have been number 1.
My only other thought is I love a movie about a parent that will go out of his way to protect their child, but every decision they make is the wrong one. Like every choice the dad makes in this movie is the wrong choice, and it ends up killing everybody he loves by the end of this movie. Like that to me is really fascinating, and I really love that about this year. All right. I think we're just down to one more movie, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
My number 1 of the year. We just talked about it on the Patreon. Our big chunky boy, the man with the huge quads, Godzilla, with Godzilla Minus One. This is not just one of the best horror movies of the year. I think it might be the best movie of the year, period. It does something that I think is really rare in a Godzilla or a monster movie. It makes you care about the human characters just as much as it does love the big kaiju action. Godzilla is phenomenal in this movie. I love the score. Said this on the Patreon episode, but I think that the Godzilla overture, I think might be like, as much as I love John Carpenter's score, as much as I love like Bernard Herrmann's music when he worked with Alfred Hitchcock with Psycho and Vertigo and others, I think the Godzilla overture might be the best piece of music ever composed for a horror movie ever. It's just so beautiful and sad, but yet epic, and announces itself in such a way. This movie made me cry at the end of it. I mean, it's definitely a melodrama. It manages to balance the spectacle and the destruction that Godzilla can wreak. It definitely does feel like Jaws at times. It feels like Spielbergian at times, yet it teaches, I think it has a wonderful message that, like, in order to be saved, people need to come together and work as communities, and don't wait for others to rescue you. And it's just wonderfully done. Was my favorite thing to watch in a theater this year, and I think it's pretty high in others' lists. So, Brian, I know you love this as well.
Yeah, I've talked about this one pretty thoroughly already myself. Couple of times, spoiler alert. But this is such a great film, and I'm again the theatrical experience of this, seeing it big, seeing that creature, as big as life, and having it really feel tangible, was pretty cool. I don't think I've seen another Godzilla movie theatrically. I mean, even like the legendary ones. So this is sort of a first-time experience of doing that in the theater. But like you said, just the human toll and the human story that's going on in this film is what elevates it to another level. It's very relatable, but also has a lot to say, I think, about, the state of the world, not just in 1945, but now. Just a really, really compelling movie. Absolutely one of my favorites as well.
Yep, absolutely. Rachel, you haven't seen this yet.
Haven't seen it, yeah. I'm excited to.
Nichole, have you seen Godzilla?
I have. I liked it so much. To what you guys have said, I think one of the shortcomings of maybe some of the more recent Godzilla movies is that it doesn't really have a good human component to it, a strong human component to it that you can also latch on to. Or there have been some entries that almost feel like Godzilla is a little bit of an afterthought. And so this, I think, is such a beautiful marriage of bringing those two worlds together to really tell a fascinating and kind of heart-tugging but also poignant story. And yeah, seeing it on the big screen is very choice.
Yes.
But I'm excited
It's like
to visit
mind altering. It's
How do you feel the kids from Skinamarink would have fared against Godzilla?
Probably not well.
If you could mesh those two movies.
Well,
Probably
how
get
is
stepped
Godzilla? Like, how are they getting out of the house?
I think Godzilla would rip the house open.
They would probably welcome that, though. They'd probably be
Probably.
like, thanks.
Kids
Gotta
do
go
love
find the
Godzilla.
carrot."
They do love Godzilla. All right. That is our top 10 for 2023. We're put the year behind us. I think 2024, it's going to be an interesting year. I think with the writer's strike, with the actor's strike, a lot of movies have been rescheduled. A lot of movies have been pushed back in the calendar. So could be fascinating. I'm interested to see how some of these movies I got to catch at Fantasia and Telluride, how they're going to fare when we'll see them. There's one movie I caught at Fantasia and Telluride where if it got an official release, it probably would have been my number one movie. And I think it comes out early January on Shudder with a limited theatrical. So we'll see where that one fares next year. I won't mention it. I want folks to discover that for themselves. But folks, what a year. What a year. I'm losing steam here, so we'll edit that part just a little. Well, let's end the episode with some plugs. Rachel, what do you have coming up with Losers Club and Halloweenies and Girls and the Boys? And
oh, yeah, all the things. Yeah, Halloweenies, we are going to be entering space.
You're in space!
The final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Nostromo as they discover and battle the xenomorphs. We're going into alien territory, and I'm super excited about that. We are nervous, but we are excited. It's a big undertaking. Can't wait to do that. And then on Losers Club, just wrapped up 11/22/63 and going to be playing catch up. So some lighter fare over the next few months. Super excited to just kind of take a breather there, at least for a moment. Yeah, and Girls on the Boys entering season 3 of The Boys. So we're almost caught up. But hey, who knows? By the time season 4 comes around, we might be there.
Excellent. Brian, what do you have coming up?
Well, on Movies for Life, like I said, we have our top 10 of 2023 coming out probably just after the first of the year. And then we have our discoveries of 2023 coming out towards the end of the month. And we just recorded that this morning, and lots of stuff on there that you may or may not know about. Lots of recommendations to hand out. Yeah, and you'll catch me here for a while on the Pod and the Pendulum talking about my guy. So I'm excited about that. So
excellent. And Nichole, what about Bodies of Horror?
Yeah, Bodies of Horror is going strong over at the Anatomy of a Scream. We're kicking off 2024 with an episode with Brian. Talking about the serpent and the rainbow. So very excited to get into some Craven there. Also going to be delving into eugenics in horror, which is just some light topic coverage there. Excited for that.
Fun time.
Yeah. But yeah, have some really cool guests coming on as well. So yeah, excited for 2024.
Excellent. Well, listeners, you know us. You know, if you are a fan, if you haven't already, I'm going to ask once again, make sure you've subscribed to the show wherever you are getting this podcast. And please take a moment to rate us 5 stars, whether it's on the Apple Store or on Spotify. And if you're getting us through Apple, take a few minutes and write us a quick review. That goes a long way to new listeners finding us. Easy way to support the show. If you haven't already, consider becoming a patron by going to patreon.com, going to the pod, patreon.com, pod and the pendulum. It's where we have all our bonus content. We've done in recent months Thanksgiving. We've done Godzilla Minus One. Sometimes we'll do some non-horror fare. I would love to cover The Iron Claw in January, one of my favorite movies of the year. I mean, it'll give me a chance to talk about like the Curse of the Von Erichs. I think we talked a little bit about like my run-in with Kerry Von Erich as a young boy when he denied me an autograph on that episode. But it's a tragic story, and the movie is incredible. Like, it left me sobbing during that movie. So I want to talk that. And that's Patreon would be the place you would do it. So go to patreon.com/pod and the pendulum. We love your support. Listenership doubled last year. It was just kind of like running through the numbers for the year. And like last year was the year things really grew, not just like 10% year over year, but like literally doubled. And
amazing.
It is kind of amazing. Yeah. So we really appreciate that. I think I have my co-host to thank for that. I think between Jess and Rachel and Brian and Nichole and Ariel and Devon and Steven, and I think I got everybody right. I don't think I left anybody out. We have so many of us now. I think that what everyone brings to the table, we have something for everybody. And listeners, we really appreciate you coming week by week and helping spread the word. I would love to double up again in 2024. And I think we have a lot of great shows, so we're going to do that. We actually have a year mapped out. We have a ton of franchises that are going to be super fun to talk about, starting with our big green ghoul, Frankenstein himself, where we cover all of the Universal Frankensteins. Brian and I will be kicking things off with a deep dive into 1931's Frankenstein, directed by James Whale, starring Boris Karloff, Mae Clark, Colin Clive, Edward Van Sloan.
Dwight Fry.
Gonna be a big one. Dwight Fry. Gonna be a big one. Pack a lunch. So we're gonna give it the full treatment it deserves. So until then, have a safe and happy new year, everyone. We'll be back in a week. Take care.